Consumers have gone SUV mad. We've said this a million times on the show, and that's because it's true. And that is why if you look at many major manufacturers today, they have got an SUV for everybody. An SUV for your aunt, your uncle, your dog, your cat. Anybody can get an SUV that is customized to them. But there are certain manufacturers that decide to do things differently. Take Jaguar for instance. They only offer 3 SUVs in their lineup: the E-Pace, the F-Pace, and of course the electric I-Pace. Today, we have got Jaguar's baby SUV on test, the facelifted E-Pace, and we want to find out if it's got the claws to make a mark in the SUV world. With most facelifts, we see the major changes happen on the outside of the vehicle, with minimal changes on the inside. The opposite has happened with the Jaguar E-Pace. As we can see, there's very little that's changed on the outside of the vehicle, but if you step inside here, this is where you see the biggest difference. This interior has been completely overhauled, and as you can see, it looks very classy inside here. The main thing you notice is just the way the interior flows as a whole. The dashboard face here has been made more driver orientated. In fact, it reminds me a lot about a Jaguar F-Type when you see and you sit inside this car like this. The most striking feature is, of course, this 11.4-inch touchscreen infotainment system. This uses the new Pivi Pro setup, which is similar to that you'd find in a Land Rover Defender. And as we know, that system works very well because we've played around with that in the Defender and we really like it, so it's good to see it in here. Another thing we notice is how they have changed the way the climate control setup looks. It looks nice and sleek, minimalistic, but it does take a little bit of time getting used to. For instance, thank goodness it tells me to pull here, because had I not known that, I would have been sitting here pushing and pushing and pushing. But when you pull, you can adjust the temperature settings like that. Very nifty. It actually feels quite James Bond-like. Another new nifty feature is a digital instrument cluster, which of course looks nice because you can toggle and see all the vehicle settings and the statistics of your driving experience. And of course, what connects you to the vehicle, the steering wheel. It looks very similar to the old one, but it's updated, it's chunkier, and it's sleeker. So inside here, you really feel like you're in a new car.
While we can't exactly say the same of the exterior, the updates are no less significant. The E-Pace was a pretty car to start with, so Jaguar didn't go to town with this facelift, but that's because they never needed to. You'll notice a new front bumper, and would you look at that, an actual vent, no stick test needed here. The headlights now feature Jaguar's signature double J blade, while the mesh on the grille has been given some pizzazz. The rear has seen even fewer tweaks, with the only change being a mesh insert on the rear bumper. You have the option of a black exterior pack, which seems to be all the rage at the moment. There are only 2 trim options available for the E-Pace, the R-Dynamic or the Sport. The latter can only be optioned with a petrol engine.
The first thing you notice when you jump into the updated Jaguar E-Pace is just how nice this engine is. This 2-litre diesel engine really works well for this vehicle. And that is a welcome thing because this car responds very nicely. For instance, if I do this, that's 430 Newton meters that I've got at my disposal. And I've also got 147 kilowatts, which is essentially what a Golf GTI produced not too long ago. So from a power perspective, this Jaguar E-Pace with this diesel engine works very nicely. Crossovers and SUVs tend to feel either one way or the other. It's either the car ends up being too hard and it becomes uncomfortable to drive, or it becomes too softly sprung and it feels like a vehicle that's going to wallow around corners. This E-Pace with its dimensions really balances the two quite nicely. Now we know that living in the city comes with this. Now, I did hit that bump quite hard, but even then, the vehicle didn't scuttle and shake like you would expect in a vehicle with firmer suspension. And how nimble it feels behind the wheel, you'd expect it to be much harder on surfaces such as speed humps. But again, the car absorbs it beautifully. Now, the whole reason why many people buy diesels is because of fuel economy. Now, this vehicle has a claimed average consumption figure of 5.3 liters, which is very low. And I don't think it's fair for us to go on the figures that we're getting right now because we have been driving this car for short bursts in and around the city. We're currently sitting at around about 8.9 liters, but I'm sure at a long distance, we would get this consumption figure to come right down. The previous Jaguar E-Pace had a feeling to it that made the car feel somewhat heavy. And I don't feel that in this car. Instead, it feels a little bit more nimble, and I think a lot of it has got to do with the steering wheel feedback. Another criticism that I had of the Jaguar E-Pace is the space inside the cabin. Now, for me as a driver, I'm very comfortable sitting here, and I'm sure my passenger would be fine. But for those who are taller, sitting in the back, you might find that the vehicle is a little bit too snug, and you might find that your head might touch a little bit. That's the one thing that the Jaguar E-Pace hasn't improved on because the vehicle shape is still very much the same. After sampling the facelifted Jaguar E-Pace, we can definitely say that this vehicle has got what it takes to make a mark in this segment. Looking at the updates of the car, it really does breathe new life into the product. The only thing that consumers might be a bit concerned about is the pricing. At 874,000 Rand starting, the E-Pace is not a cheap vehicle. But we need to remember that Jaguar fully imports their vehicles into South Africa, which means that their pricing might be a bit more compared to a manufacturer that builds cars here. All things considering, this new Jaguar E-Pace is a lovely vehicle indeed. Is it worth the money? Well, that's up to you as a consumer. Personally, we feel for that type of money, you might be able to get yourself a bigger car that offers a little bit more.